everyone. Welcome back to Underreported Stories, where I cover the news that CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News fail to report on or don't report on enough. And joining me today is Semafor's White House correspondent, Shelby Talcott. Welcome to the show, Shelbs.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. This is so fun. I feel like this is a monumental day, obviously, because it's Trump's 100th day in office. And I didn't plan this by any, you were planning on coming on the show before I knew I was coming to DC for this. I'm like, I cannot think of a more perfect person to talk about this than you. You've gotten to sit front row for Trump's, his entire presidential run and then the presidency. So what has that been like for you? And can you kind of give the audience an insight as to what you do and what it means to actually cover a presidency?
Yeah. So first, it has been a lot. There's been a lot of lack of sleep, but it's been a lot of fun. And I think, we came into this, or at least I came into this kind of knowing that this was going to be the pace in which the Trump administration was doing things, because they told us during the transition, I was talking to White House officials who were saying, listen, just to let you know, we're going to be going so aggressively, and it's intentional, right? They want to overwhelm the system. They've said that. They want to kind of be pushing out so much news every single day that their, perceived opponents don't really know what to focus on. Mm-hmm. And you've seen some success with that. But in terms of just covering the White House day in and day out, it's been really fun, because obviously Caroline has the briefings once or twice a week. I don't have a seat in the briefing room, but you can stand on the sides. We've been in the new media seat, which has been a fun opportunity. And then you just never know when Trump is going to talk to you guys. And sometimes it's 3 times a day. So that's been, wow. You're always on your toes. I was in the pool the other day. So the smaller group of reporters who are kind of designated to go and follow the president around that day. And we were only supposed to have one sort of public appearance with Trump, and we ended up having 3 that day. So yeah, it's been a lot. I'm at the White House a lot, almost every day, but I'm traveling with the president to Michigan later on today, but it's been fun.
That's so cool. Have you gotten to go on Air Force One?
This will be my first time on Air Force One, so I'll let everyone know how it is. I don't know if pictures are allowed, but
I know that's the one thing.
Yeah,
I've seen people take pictures of their food
yes.
and their name card on there, but I've never seen the inside outside of. I think our old colleague Henry has a picture with Trump on it.
Yeah,
maybe, but that might have been Trump's personal.
That might have been Trump's personal plane. I think on the campaign trail.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a kind of tough question for you, maybe. The administration very much bills itself as the most transparent administration. And I know you don't necessarily have something to compare it to, because I know you weren't super in the press pool when it came to Biden, because they were never going to let you anyway. But they claim to be super transparent. Is that what you actually experience as well? Or do you still experience some of those roadblocks?
I think, with every administration you experience sort of pushback or things that they don't want to tell you, or maybe, their responses are very carefully worded, so they're not technically lying, but it's evasive. Everyone experiences that. I think the difference with this administration, I covered the Biden administration a little bit at the Daily Caller before I switched over to Semafor. The big difference I see is just the amount of times we're able to talk to the president, and even really cabinet officials. So that's really different. So if the transparency argument is, how often are we seeing people and being able to ask questions and getting answers from the president himself? Yes, that's a really big difference.
Oh, that's awesome. It's good to hear, you bill a lot of things out to the public, and we hear those announcements in middle America, but then to know that that's actually what's happening on the ground here, it's refreshing, because a lot of the times you see something, you hear something that's happening, and you don't actually know if it's being implemented. On the note of 100 days of Trump, I know that you're a journalist, and this is probably not your favorite question, but if you were to give the Trump administration a grade on anything, their transparency, the way they've worked with the media, whatever, how are you grading the Trump administration right now?
I think it's so hard to give one grade, because there's so many different things going on. Yes. So, for example, he has pretty high marks generally on immigration. The American people think he's doing well on immigration. Those marks have lowered a little bit because of the focus on specific cases. But overall, right, on tariffs, people are a lot more concerned, right? The American public doesn't really know what's going on. There's a lot of changes going on. So I think it really depends on each individual thing that the Trump administration is trying to put out. And again, that's intentional. They're trying to do all of this all at the same time, all at once. They're trying to overwhelm the system. And I think there's also a recognition, this is the president's second term. He wants to leave a legacy. So he's making massive changes that I think the American public might be uncomfortable with now. And the Trump administration's argument is just wait, in a year or two, you'll feel a lot more comfortable and things will be better. So that's the argument. So I do think it's hard to give a grade only 100 days in if you're basing things on the Trump administration's argument. And I also think the grades would be different based on what the topic is.
You're so right. I was trying just trying my hardest to come up with a grade just to have an answer if I wanted to. And I was kind of settling somewhere in the like B plus A minus range of like, but it didn't feel like it doesn't set right because the immigration thing, that's an A plus to me. It really is. But you're right. Like one of the big things I remember reaching out to Fox News' Dana Perino when she was, I think she was hosting one of the Republican primary debates. Yeah. I was like, ask about housing prices. Like we all in our generation, I know you're like, what, a year older than me, whatever. We all want to know about like, how can we afford to buy a house?
Crazy. Yeah.
It's
So there's some of that stuff where it's like, they haven't been able to do as much on. Yeah. So I really think it's dependent on the situation. And maybe the D will turn into a B in a year and a half.
Exactly.
But we don't know that yet.
We've yet to see. Yeah, guys. Well, we've got some more stories. We got information on Trump deporting a 2-year-old citizen. We're going to give you more context on that. Plus the fallout of the White House Correspondents Association gala over the weekend. Shelby was there, so she's going to give us some inside scoop. Plus the DEA raided a nightclub and got a ton of MS-13 gang members. Guys, this is crazy. We're going to get into all of that and more. So without further ado, let us get into the 5 underreported stories that you need to know. Our first story, which has been a big question in my DMs this weekend, is did the Trump administration actually deport a 2-year-old citizen? And I made a reel about it. If you guys are interested in watching it, just head over to Instagram or TikTok. You can watch the full explanation. Long story short, yes, the Trump administration technically did deport a 2-year-old child with her mother. Her mother is an illegal immigrant. The illegal immigrant mother was then sent back to Honduras, and the mom wanted to take her daughter with her. That is the full story. That's more context. According to the Justice Department, they have denied a request to take the custody of the girls and give the custody of the girls over to a sister-in-law. Kind of verklempt over there, a little cray-cray. But the Justice Department has denied this because there's a handwritten note from this mother who wanted her kids to go back with her. The Justice Department lawyers have also said that it is in the child's best interest to remain with her mother and that she is welcome back into the U.S. because she is a legal citizen. She can come back whenever. So Shelby, as a reporter, I was looking at this story and I was like, Trump is either a monster for letting the child go or he's a monster for kicking the whole family out or for letting her stay and kicking just the mom out. Like he's a monster in the eyes of the left no matter what. I don't think there was a winning situation on this. But to our point, immigration has been a pretty good issue for Trump outside of this story and Kilmar Abrego Garcia, which we've covered. If I never hear the name Kilmar Abrego Garcia, I'd be good for the rest of my life. But is there any way for the Trump administration to win in this scenario? Because this is just like a bad look all around.
I don't know. It's a good question. I think probably not, because it's just such a tough situation, and there's a lot of he said, she said, right? You have defendants of this woman saying, well, they deported an American citizen. This is the girl's daughter. She should have been allowed to stay. And then you have kind of the law and the Trump administration's argument, which is, okay, the mother said, I want to take my 2-year-old with me. But it's a tough situation. I don't know that it's going to get the same amount of sort of extended coverage that is compared to the Abrego Garcia case. We heard about it yesterday in the briefing room, actually. Somebody asked about it, and the answer essentially was what you just said, was that this woman was here illegally, and she asked for her daughter to go with her home. So I don't know if this is going to end up in this sort of long, extended, months-long thing that we've seen with Abrego Garcia. But these are the tough kind of no-win media coverage situations that the Trump administration has had to grapple with immigration, and that Democrats have really latched onto as they kind of seek to find a way to coalesce around Trump's strategy.
Yeah. What is it like for you in new media trying to cover this? Because I know we're kind of in the same boat as this, as you're trying to grow your socials and whatnot, of like, I don't actually care what people think. Like, if you hate Trump for kicking this kid out and kicking the family out, I don't care what your outcome or your opinion is. I just want you to be informed with the facts. And the fact that over the weekend we saw CNN, Newsweek, MSNBC, every single news outlet you could possibly think of saying, Trump deports 2-year-old. Like, let's have some context to that, you know? Or Trump wears blue suit to Pope's, he died. What is the word?
Funeral.
Thank you. I'm like, he did. So yeah, Trump wears blue suit to Pope's funeral. They show a picture of all black people in all black suits and then Trump in blue. And then you zoom out and a bunch of other people were wearing blue. It's just like the context of it. So when you're navigating in new media, how do you navigate in this whole realm of like bringing the full facts, but still trying to find an audience that's interested in this like hyper partisan news world?
Well, I think a lot of the American public, and we saw this on the campaign trail, is kind of tired of being told how to think and being told what to think. And I think it helps us as new media members that so many Americans, I think, are tired of that and are just looking for people to tell them what's going on because they're smart enough to form their own opinions. And maybe that opinion is not the same opinion that I have or not the same opinion that you have, but that's fine, right? They're not looking for somebody to kind of shove an opinion down their throat. So in that sense, I think it's been kind of easy for us because people are looking for that kind of coverage. I also think, at Semafor, for example, one of the main reasons that this company was created was because we felt like there was kind of this gap in more transparent news. And so the way we kind of format all of our articles is the news, which is the facts. And then we'll have Shelby's view, which is my analysis, right? Which might be different from then the room for disagreement, which maybe is your analysis of the situation. And so it provides kind of, it acknowledges that reporters and journalists might have opinions about things, but that is separate from the news. And I think the way that a lot of legacy outlets are structured, it doesn't allow for that nuance. It doesn't allow for them to say, here's actually what's going on, and then here's how I'm viewing it. But just to let you know, this is how I'm viewing it, right? It kind of gets, the waters get muddied.
I know, and it's really silly that the waters do get muddied because love her or hate her, but I think Megyn Kelly's a really great example of this, of somebody that if you tune into her morning show, which is like a 10-minute morning news update or whatever, it's just the facts. Like, she does a really good job at presenting the news, and then she has a show where she goes on to like give her opinions. And I say that all the time. Like, I am a journalist, we go on, I report the facts. I'm doing that on what, but yeah, I have opinions too. And I think this idea that we can all just be like unbiased drones giving the news without presenting a little bit of bias is like a little delusional, if I do say so myself. Like, I think there are a handful of people that are designed for that, but by and large, it's not what reporters are anymore.
Yeah, I think the vast majority, reporters are people. You're going to have opinions. You're going to have thoughts about things. Your background is going to shape how you think. Yeah. And that's fine. But you should be able to express that very clearly to your viewers.
Absolutely. Be transparent with them. Like, I can still give you the news and have told you I voted for Trump or something like that. I do want to get, speaking of journalism and reporting and everything, I want to get to our next story, which is truly some of the most insufferable people in the media committed like the gravest sin of all. So if you guys did not see this, over the weekend, the White House Correspondents Association held its annual gala. And while the gala was going on, this organization, which Shelby, you can kind of give us a little bit more on the back end of this, like what the White House Correspondents Association is. But it's now run by a very liberal black man, Eugene Daniels, who used to run Politico. And while this speech was going on, one of the cameramen was talking, or I guess the host of the show was talking about Black Press USA Washington Bureau Chief April Ryan. And then they pulled the camera towards NBC's White House correspondent, Yamiche Alcindor. Now, both of these women are larger black women, and that's about all they have in common. And I just know that if literally anybody else decided to do this, they would be canceled. But this organization is run by one of the wokies, by one of the lefties. So of course, like, they get a clear pass. This is not going to make news. It's on Underreported Stories, not a big story. But, you're at these White House Correspondents events, like, give us an insight into what they're actually like. Because to me, this seems like the most absurd circus charade But you're actually there. I'm just sitting here like judging from afar.
Well, so first, the White House Correspondents Association is basically made up of a group of journalists who are voted on. So all of us in the White House Correspondents Association, you get a vote.
Is Semafor in?
We're in the White House Correspondents Association, but we aren't voting members. So there's like different tiers, and we don't qualify to be a voting member.
How do you qualify?
I believe you have to either have a seat in the briefing room or be in the pool. Okay. And we are in neither. We get added to the pool by the White House, but we're not in the White House or correspondence pool. So we're not voting members, but the voting members get to vote every 4 years, and it's sort of it's basically like a mini government, I guess. And they're the ones who historically have controlled the briefing room seats. They pick who gets to sit where every year. They control the pool, so who gets to kind of go in and do the extra
They're
events.
like an HOA.
It kind of, yeah. And the idea behind it historically was it's better for journalists to kind of police themselves and have a level of independence from the White House, so that the White House isn't dictating kind of all the coverage, right?
Yeah.
I actually didn't go to the dinner this year. I asked my boss if I was like, please. I don't know. I was just like, I've been there. I've done it. Yeah. I did it when I was at the Daily Caller. There were other people at our company who hadn't gone yet, so they went. But the dinner is essentially this huge black tie affair with all of the journalists, and historically, like, celebrities will come. I think Kim Kardashian came the year that I went. Yeah. So historically, it's this big bougie affair to kind of like celebrate journalists. But there's a lot of critiques around it. There's critiques because you're getting very cozy with sources and administration officials because they're all there. They're sitting at your table. And there's kind of questions over whether it's necessary because it's very extravagant. And then there's a whole weekend around it, right? There's parties every single night. There was the Time party. There was a Substack party. There was a CNN party. There was a Politico party. There's an NBC. Like, every single network hosts these like extravagant black tie affairs. I didn't grow up in DC. I didn't grow up political at all. I didn't grow up in journalism or really dreaming of being a journalist. So for me, it's not necessarily my scene or my favorite weekend, but for a lot of people, they really enjoy it.
Yeah.
I'd be content hanging at home watching Bravo with my dog. But
Dusty. I think it's so funny. I don't like to use this word because I believe people call this weekend nerd prom. Yeah, nerd prom.
Yeah.
To me, I'm like, you sound like such a hater by calling it nerd prom. Like, sorry you weren't invited. I'm just like, it is DC's version of, like a prom event, or I compare it more to like an unserious Met Gala. Like, it really is. It's just kind of like the Met Gala for DC. That's the best way to describe it. But again, like, I'm just interested a little bit more in like the services that it provides for you. Like, it's so easy for us on the outside to just be like, this is stupid. I actually mean it when I say like, it reminds me of an HOA. I think HOAs are the dumbest thing in the world. They're just like little power hungry people. And to me, the White House Correspondents Association kind of serves a similar role, but like, are we missing something? Like, is there a genuine service outside of trying to be a middleman between journalists and the White House? Because now that everything in journalism has gotten so political, does it still serve that same role with the politicization?
I think they're trying to figure that out because, of course, the White House, this administration has kind of taken back the reins of a lot of the functions that the White House Correspondents Association historically did. I think the one argument, there's been a lot of conservatives saying this is great. The White House Correspondents Association has become too political. We shouldn't give them any power. I guess my pushback to that is I do think that there is a benefit, and maybe the White House Correspondents Association isn't perfect and has to kind of figure out a way to incorporate more new media voices and not just be kind of made up or focused on the TV aspect as much. But I do think that there's an argument to be made that it is beneficial to have a degree of separation between any administration and journalists, right? Because what happens in 10 years if there's a Democratic president and they say, well, the Trump administration decided to take the reins back from the White House Correspondents Association. So now we're going to do the same. We're going to decide who gets to sit in the briefing room or who gets to go in and see, I don't know, President AOC or whoever it is, right?
Like she's the biggest threat for sure.
So that, I think it could backfire.
Yeah.
And so I do think that there's a benefit to the argument that journalists get to decide or help curate kind of who is being able to go to some of these events.
Yeah, and back to our conversation about 100 days into the Trump administration and what that's looked like, I think that must be one of the reasons that really lowers my score. It's not a low score, but like lowers my score is I look at some of these policies that he's trying to implement and I'm like, oh my gosh, just imagine when a Democrat gets power and that's how this is going to be implemented. Like it's all going to backfire. So much of what keeps happening, I'm like, this just reminds me, it's really reminiscent of when McConnell was saying, don't get rid of the filibuster. It's going to backfire on you when Republicans get in office and just start rapid fire getting judges in these seats and filling these vacancies. It's going to backfire for you guys. And I'm sitting there kind of going, oh, I see the writing on the wall of this backfire.
And I've asked Trump administration officials about this kind of argument, like what happens when a Democratic president, and their argument so far has been, well, we're doing so well, it's the next president's going to be a Republican, right? Fine, sure, but eventually the history shows we're probably not going to have a Republican president for the rest of our lives, right? And so I do think that's something that people forget, and it's really important to keep in mind, not just with the White House Correspondents Association, but with a lot of these laws and executive orders that are being pushed.
100%. All right, guys, I want to get into our next story, which is CNN's primetime ratings have hit a new low with their viewership in primetime, dropping below 500,000 viewers. Less than 100,000 of those are in the key demographics. So for those who don't pay super close attention to any of this stuff, the key demographic is considered people ages 25 to 54, which is like the bulk of people in America. And that demographic for an average CNN show has now dropped to under 100,000, with, I believe, 99,000 people in that key demo watching, meaning pretty much everybody that's watching cable news is 54 plus years old. Not super breaking news. I think we've known that for quite a while, that cable news is kind of dying off with the boomer generation. But Shelby, this was interesting because you go on CNN, and I always say I go on Newsmax. I'm a Newsmax contributor. It's not any secret. Like they pay me. I go on TV. It's a great gig. You do something similar with CNN, but I don't get to see it because I don't get to go on set. I'm at my home in DC, or in Nashville, in my studio. So I don't want to like diminish these numbers, because 500,000 people is 500,000 people. That's still a lot of influence. So I'm not here to diminish these numbers, but there are daily podcasts that are doing triple that and quadruple that. What do you see when you're on set? Like, is it just a mindset and leadership that's like really got to like grasp on these executives that they can't see past new media coming to surpass them? Or like, what do you see when you're on these sets?
It's a really good question, because I think, and this isn't just CNN specific, because I've gone on Fox, I go on NBC. I think the problem with all of these legacy outlets is they haven't quite figured out how to break into the new media sphere. And they're all trying, right? They're all like, they had CNN Plus. I think now it's called CNN Max, where they're doing streaming. NBC has something similar. Fox has something similar. But nobody has quite nailed it for whatever reason. And I don't know whether that's they're still too stuck and focused on the format of traditional cable news, right? Because when you look at CNN Max, it is essentially the same exact format as CNN, just online, right? So there's not really a distinct differentiating factor that we're seeing with podcasts or long form interviews, right? Like Joe Rogan is sitting down for 3 hours. And you don't see that. You're seeing with CNN and Fox and MSNBC, they're all, for example, if they do a sit-down interview with somebody for 2 hours, they're still clipping that into an hour-long segment or a 20-minute long segment. And that's really different than what we're seeing with new media, which is kind of long-form conversations and different formats and maybe a little bit more, you know, focused on younger generations. Nobody's figured out, I don't think, in legacy news, even in print legacy news, Washington Post, New York Times, how to shift. And it would be a huge shift. They'd have to shift their entire strategy. No one knows how to do it yet, I don't think.
It's really crazy to me because this is where the audience is. You know, like, it's not about, yes, they have a couple more years, but the demise of cable is imminent at this point. Like they're not building up enough people to get watching unless, I don't know, we all turn 54 years old and we all just like suddenly become sad
now we're
sacks.
back.
Yeah,
we're back on
we're
TV.
back, baby.
I mean, I haven't had cable, I don't know, since
Shelby, ever.
Like, I don't know if I ever have. I take my aunt's sometimes. Like, I use her like Optimum login. Sorry. They're going to get a call. She's going to get a call from Optimum being like, you're not allowed to do that.
No. No, we have like YouTube TV, which I guess is kind of pseudo cable, but like use it to watch sports. I'm not watching the news with it. Even when I do, it's on mute because I'm looking for stuff for my job, not as a viewer. I like to think, and I say this all the time, I try my best to be like your average Joe, but at the same time, like we're really wrapped up and steeped into the day-to-day politics of all of it. So it's like what I say I do or what you do, like that's abnormal compared to the rest of the American population. I barely turn on the news though, and I'm steeped in it every single day. I can't imagine what people that actually have like a more important job in life do other than what I'm doing.
Yeah, so I'm curious to see where it goes because I know that all of these companies are trying very hard to figure it out. They just, for whatever reason, they haven't. Yeah,
you've been getting on TikTok recently too, and Daily Mail has seen a lot of success on TikTok, taking their news stories and turning it. You kind of see the New York Post starting to get a little savvy and smart about that. Our old friend and colleague Jenny, I see her a lot more places than I used to. They're trying to get smart about adding a digital element to everything that they're doing with their news stories. You would think that CNN, MSNBC, all of these places would kind of get to it, and I know they are. They're attempting to, but it comes across as really disingenuous compared to like we have a report from you on TikTok, and it just feels more real.
Yeah, and again, I think part of the problem, because I've seen like these CNN TikToks and these Fox News TikToks, is it's just so similar. It's basically what they're putting on their website or what they're putting on TV, just like clipped and then tossed onto TikTok. And I don't know if they would maybe be more successful if they had, more of kind of a casual speaking style to people, or, had somebody sitting down on the mic, which I know they've been trying to do as well. Again, and maybe it's also because some of these legacy outlets just have so much history that people are reluctant to watch them. It could be, I don't know. But again, right, New York Post is doing pretty well. Daily Mail is doing pretty well. They have they've been around for a long time.
Yeah. I don't think they hamstring their reporters as much though. I can't speak. I'm not privy to any of these conversations that go on behind closed doors when it comes to like Fox News anchors, but I would imagine that the things that you can say, the things that you can do are probably really structured, and the things that you can and can't say, and the people that when you get so close to power, you're not just worried. Like, I mean, I say this all the time. I like doing my show because I don't care who I piss off. Like, I don't really have that many connections anyways. Like, who cares? Like, who am I going to upset? And that's what I really like. And I feel like it's not as freeing, but that's why like the Joe Rogans of the world, like he has connections, but more people care to be connected to him than he does to other people. And there's power and liberty in that. I feel like I sounded like Meghan Markle for a second saying that, but it's true. Like it's very freeing to be independent and on your own. And when you have a boss in corporate media, that's why when we intro the show all the time, I'm like CNN, MSNBC, and Fox, they are all corporate owned, corporate interests. They have got so many levels of leadership that are like, can't say this. Oh, don't say that. You might insinuate this. You might piss off that person. And then there's so many people with all their networks that it's like, you basically can't say anything but the proved talking points. And who the hell wants to watch that after a while?
That's a really good point. I think that and I'm glad you brought that up because I do think also media and just in general, what people watch is shifting towards, away from kind of this official kind of disingenuous, very, very, yes, exactly. The reporter voice, like people want to know about you. They want to be able to feel like they can talk to you. They want to feel like they're on a FaceTime. They want to feel like they're friends with you. And I think that is the exact opposite when I'm on TV, for example, right? Like it's very different. You're figuring out what you can say within 30 seconds. You're being very careful about what you say. And that's not what people want to see or what younger people want to see. And so I think that they've also struggled to shift out of this decades-long mentality of, okay, we have to put on our reporter voice. We need to make sure we're getting everything to you in 30 seconds, and we need to sound very official, and we need to have no opinion, and we need to, right? Like, that's not how people want to watch things anymore.
But that goes back to our original point that we were talking about is we don't believe you when you say, and I'm not saying you, but like, I don't believe the reporters when they say, I'm going to come on here, I'm going to talk like this, and I'm going to pretend I have no bias. Fuck right off. Like, yes, you do. You have so much bias. And I think that's what comes across as a charade. It's like, maybe I don't need to know your life. I can't imagine that like Sean Hannity does a get ready with me, like cringe. Like
I've seen Dana Perino do like the
get dressed with me.
They get dressed with me or not good, what am I wearing today?
Yeah, she's so cute and like it comes across as super sweet, but don't get me wrong, like her intern did that for her. Do you know what I mean? Like that's really where like the disconnect is like, and also, this just is all of corporate media right now is we're starting to like age into that part where this should be like a helm that we start to step into in some way. The old guard's like not interested in giving it up. Like the people that are on camera are getting older and older and they don't slow down. It's honestly quite impressive. It's like Trump, like he's a straight up grandpa and he's got more energy than me.
It's kind of like people in Congress too. We should have term limits for people, for news anchors. I think.
Oh my gosh, clip it. I love it. All right, I want to get into two other stories that are a little bit more immigration related. This first one is that the FBI released a report about 6 days ago from this report, but I had not heard about this, that they believe the Venezuelan government officials, quote, likely facilitate the migration of members of the gang Tren de Aragua, which you guys have all heard that name before, from Venezuela to the U.S. in an effort to advance the Maduro regime's objective of undermining public safety. Okay, I am calling bullshit on this.
Really?
Yeah, I'm
Why?
calling bullshit on this. So I'm obviously very interested to hear your take. But I kind of feel like the Alien Enemies Act has been very contentious that's what the Trump administration is using to deport people like Abrego Garcia and send these people, illegal immigrants with criminal backgrounds, to that prison in El Salvador. I think that if you are trying to create a facade that this is worse than it is, you create a report that says exactly what you believe you want it to say. Like you're trying to get a link between a government that doesn't like you and things that we kind of know it's happening. Like I'm not saying it's a complete lie, but we might be perhaps pumping up the correlation in order to make the Aliens Enemy Act a worthwhile way of going about this.
Well, you need, from my understanding, you need that in order to invoke the Alien Enemies Act, right? I have this from the Brennan Center. The president may invoke the Alien Enemies Act in times of declared war or when a foreign government threatens or undertakes an invasion or predatory excursion against U.S. territory. And what was interesting was in the proclamation when Donald Trump signed the Alien Enemies Act, he specifically wrote that Tren de Aragua is, quote, undertaking hostile actions and conducting regular warfare against the U.S. at the direction of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. And so that was the administration's argument for being able to invoke the Alien Enemies Act. So it's not surprising that the FBI found this, whether it's legitimate or not, because that's how you invoke the Alien Enemies Act.
Right. So there's just part of me, I'm not saying it's not real. I'm not denying it. I'm just saying it's very convenient. And whenever something is that convenient, red flags start to go up in my mind because there's just something inherently narcissistic about it. I sound so awful saying this, but like it is. It's a little narcissistic to think that like the Maduro regime is up at night, like he's got his glasses on and his speech is how to destroy America. Like people don't really think about America as much. Like they're worried about their own country, and not that he's really worried about his own people, but like I don't think the Maduro regime sits there at night and goes, let's just start sending illegal immigrants into the U.S. Do I think it is happening with the blessing of the Maduro regime? For sure. But I don't think it's like a sought out plan in their Congress.
Yeah,
I
don't know whether, obviously, I haven't seen the data, whether or not they're actively sending migrants into the U.S. They are certainly tied up in these gangs in Venezuela, right? The Venezuelan regime is extremely corrupt.
Yes.
And so, beyond that, I wouldn't say I'm a Venezuela expert,
No,
but
neither of us
certainly,
are.
right, the Venezuela regime is tied to these gangs and is wildly corrupt. Whether or not they're sitting down and sending buses of people into the U.S., I don't know.
Yeah. I'm just interested from your expertise of like being around all of these DC professionals. Do you think hypothetically there is a way to not falsifying is not what I'm saying. I'm not saying they're falsifying, to dramatize a report of this nature?
I'm sure there is. I don't know. I guess I don't know what the benefit of doing this would be to kind of bolster the administration's argument for using the Alien Enemies Act. But I also think that, like, I kind of think it could be legit just because of how corrupt the Venezuela regime is. But yeah, certainly anytime any administration finds things, right, they're going to paint it in the best or most aggressive light. That's not surprising. And I'm not specifically talking about this. I'm just talking generally about kind of any report that comes out that they want to push out.
Yeah. I just think the timing of this, if it came out 70 days ago, for sure. I just think that now that the Alien Enemies Act has been kind of pushed back on, I'm like, something's not adding up. Anyway, something that is 100% true, there are no qualms or doubts about it, is that DEA agents, like hundreds of them, went to a nightclub in Colorado that they had been tipped off on, knowing that there were a bunch of MS-13 gang members within that frequented this club. And they detained 114 migrants, as well as, I mean, according to the DEA, I'm looking at it right here, significant drug trafficking and prostitution was happening within this club. And they seized a bunch of gun and cocaine and something called Tusi, which I guess is pink cocaine.
Yeah, I would not know. I don't know my drugs. I'll say that on the record.
So I'm very curious about your thoughts on this. To me, this is the kind of big win stories that the Trump administration is actually winning the immigration war on. But of course, you're not seeing this story everywhere. Mm-hmm. This is like getting pushed to the side, and we're going to talk about the 2-year-old that was deported, quote unquote.
Right, and I think that there's arguments to be made to focus on the mistakes of the administration, right? More so than the successes sometimes, just to keep the administration accountable, or maybe not mistakes, but when you have questions or something seems a little bit fishy. But this has been a big argument that the Trump administration has made, and really every administration has made, is that the media doesn't focus enough kind of on the wins, which I think is standard. I wouldn't argue that it is only this era that we've seen that, right? Like the media likes drama, and they like the things that look fishy and aren't working very well, more so than they like saying, okay, Trump had this really big win.
But that's fair. Like, I like getting a good scoop better than I like.
But it's not the whole story.
Totally.
You're right.
Totally. Okay, so you and I pride both of us on this, in that we don't just sit in our Republican enclaves. We like to talk to different people. We have friends. I'm going to assume you definitely have friends who are liberal, like myself as well. This is such a winning issue for Republicans. We've talked about immigration as basically like a through line through this entire episode. What is the stronghold, you think, on the Democratic Party that is preventing them from, they don't need to admit they're wrong, but like moderate a little on this?
Well, I think part of the reason, I think there's a few things. First, the Democratic Party doesn't really have a leader, right? And so you have all of these different levels within the Democratic Party, just like the Republican Party has, quite frankly. You have, the progressives, and then you have the more moderate Democrats. And so there's all of these differing viewpoints on kind of how far to go with immigration and how much to defend certain things. Mm-hmm. It's all different. They're arguing amongst themselves, and there's no one at the top to say, hey guys, hold on. we just lost an election. Here's what our message needs to be. And so instead, you're seeing a lot of differing opinions. You're seeing some lawmakers go to El Salvador and push for Abrigo Garcia to be released. You're seeing others kind of stay quiet about the issue. You're seeing Gavin Newsom, for example, start a new podcast and kind of shift his entire mentality towards virtually, I don't know, every issue he's ever had.
He's a huge Charlie Kirk fan now.
Yeah, loves Charlie Kirk. Amazing. And so I think that's the big problem within the Democratic Party is simply that they don't have anyone at the top telling them what their message is going to be. And historically, Democrats have been really good about this, I think.
Oh, I agree.
They've been very good about picking a message. And for the most part, with the exception of maybe the progressive wing, which is really, that few AOC kind of caucus, sticking to that message. They've been good at that. Mm-hmm. They're not good at that right now. And that's been a really big problem for them.
I don't like to get into the game of predictions, but I more so take this as an analysis than a prediction. So I'm not asking you to be like, who do you think the 2028, mm-hmm. Not that. But what part of the Democratic caucus right now, because it is split, there's a lot of infighting, which I think infighting between parties is good. It means the best ideas will come to the top and the cream always rises. I just have felt very strongly that populism of MAGA world and populism of AOC are really not that far apart, especially when it comes to like younger generations. You're a hop, skip, and a jump from each other. Mm-hmm. I actually feel like the polarizing part of it is liberalism versus conservatism, which are so polar opposite that this populist movement has gotten so close. Do you think AOC is a bigger threat than like your Chuck Schumers of the world?
I don't know yet. I think probably not.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say no fully. I think probably not, only because there are so many other kind of like rising potential stars for 2028 for the Democratic Party that I think like I wouldn't put AOC as number one. Maybe she's a dark horse, sure, but there's, you have the Pennsylvania governor, you have the California governor, you have Gretchen Whitmer, you have all of these folks who are very clearly looking at ways to kind of become the leader of the Democratic Party. I would say maybe if it was a different circumstance and there wasn't such stiff competition. I also think that she's kind of gotten herself into trouble and sometimes goes too far.
Yeah.
And that's why really we saw, and I'm curious to see over the next 4 years how much maybe the public shifts and how happy they are with the Trump administration's efforts, because part of the reason that Trump won this time around was because Americans felt that they had shifted too far to the left, right? And I think the pendulum always swings. Is it going to swing in 2028 from the right all the way over to the AOC left? I don't know.
That's my argument is I don't think they're that far apart anymore. That if AOC, which I don't think she's a good conduit for it, but she has the ideas, the populist messaging of the Bernies, of the AOCs. I'm just saying you strip away men, competing in women's sports, you strip away woke like political correctness, you strip away like supporting illegal immigration. You take those three issues, which are the most contentious, common sense issues in America right now, take that away from the Progressive Party. It's not that far off from MAGA. It's just different ways of going about it. And to me, that's where politics is actually so close. It's where it's why we see liberal and conservative as like here, if you're in the listening audience, like here closer to each other. And then we see progressive and, really, really far right, or MAGA as people, far right / MAGA, whatever you want to call it, on these opposing ends. I actually see it as the inverse, that MAGA and populism and this like fake pseudo-socialism agenda are so close that if you just take away these really contentious issues, you're gonna have people going flip-flop, flip-flop, flip-flop. Because you saw that in 2016, right?
Yeah.
The Bernie bros were like, F the establishment, I'm voting for Trump. They did it again in 2024. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see your point, but I guess I think AOC, for example, would lean more into the kind of pseudo-socialism policies than she would kind of shift and focus on some of the more kind of mainstream policies that might bring both of those sides together.
Yeah.
So I'm not convinced that she would shift her strategy in the way that the American public would want to see in order to be able to vote for her.
Yeah, I don't think she's the right conduit. I think her ideas are actually far more scary to me, and not because they're bad scary, but because I think they're more effective scary than like a Chuck Schumer or something like that. But before we wrap today, so I have like a little note on my computer. I keep a running list of like videos, articles that I want to react to. And one of them was from you back in February. You put this great video together. So I'm going to let you guys all listen and watch this, and we will react on the other side.
Donald Trump has a new picture hanging outside of the Oval Office. It's his mugshot. That's right, this image, taken, of course, when he was indicted in Fulton County, Georgia, on efforts to overturn the 2020 election, is actually a New York Post cover that featured that mugshot. Now, this isn't really surprising. I covered Donald Trump throughout his presidential run, and when this mugshot was taken, his team really quickly tried to amplify it. They sought to flip the narrative, putting the image on t-shirts and mugs until it effectively became a rallying cry for his base. And in some ways, it worked. Campaign aides told me at the time that this image, combined with the indictments against Donald Trump, really reinvigorated his base and revved them up, and ultimately, they think it helped him win the presidential election. So it's not surprising that there's almost a sense of pride that Donald Trump and his team have in this mugshot. And now, for the first time ever, the president's mugshot will sit outside of the Oval Office.
Amazing. I loved that video. To me, it was just the epitome of fact-based journalism while also showcasing something that people don't understand. Like, oh my gosh, any other person in regular media would be promoting this as like, oh my gosh, he has a mugshot. Like, he is promoting his lawlessness. You didn't come at it from some sort of like MAGA conservative point of view. You just stated the facts and showed the other side in the most logical and rational way. And I'm not sitting here to go like, yay, and like blow smoke up your ass, but like, that's what we need more of. And my final question for you is like, how do you maintain that when everything is telling you to be hyper politicized in this movement?
It's hard. I think what is helpful for me is I really didn't grow up political.
Yeah.
I was a former professional tennis player, and when I retired in 2019, I'd studied journalism at the University of Iowa. And when I first got my job at the Daily Caller and was going to write about politics, one of my aunts, who is very political, literally looked at me and she was like, "You're going to write about politics? Like, are you sure? Do you know anything about politics?" And I was kind of like, yeah, I'll figure it out. And I think that's actually helped me because I didn't grow up political. I also think it was beneficial that I started at the Daily Caller because I kind of feel like I understand the Republican argument a lot better. And I also think it's good to get out of DC. Like, a lot of reporters and people are so intertwined with DC, and it's just not real life a lot of times. Mm-mm. It's not what the vast majority of the American public cares about. It's not what they're focused on. And it's not how they want to hear things. And so I always try to kind of do my TikToks, which I need to be better about. But I always try to do things from the perspective of, like, how would I explain this to my college teammates who I have a group text with who are not political and just kind of want to know what's going on or want to know the other argument of things. And I think that's helped keep me kind of in the middle. And I also think that it's rare. And so me staying kind of in this format where I can explain how Republicans are feeling and explain the other point of view, a lot of people aren't able to do that. And so it's beneficial to me, honestly, from like a job perspective, to be able to just keep kind of that mentality.
Yeah, hell yeah. Well, if people want to support all of your work, where can they follow you?
I am on X at Shelby Talcott. Okay. I'm also on TikTok.
Heck yeah.
I believe it's also my name, Shelby Talcott.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, those two.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. If you're a real one and you made it to the end of today's show, will you drop the 100 emoji as an homage to Trump's first 100 days? I'll see you back here on Thursday. Bye, friends. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to subscribe and leave a comment about how beautiful, intelligent, and funny I am. And if you want more content, click right over here for more videos and clips of my show. I'll see you back here next time. Bye.